Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are diving into what might be the single most contested idea in modern finance and personal development, the whole wealth creation story.
Right.
Is the path to financial freedom paved by this relentless entrepreneurial hustle, taking huge risks and having a pretty decent measure of luck, the kind of story that dominates all the headlines.
Or is it something else entirely? Is the secret just boring, decades-long discipline, budgeting, and extreme frugality?
It's the ultimate conflict, right?
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating here is that our sources, they kind of force us to look at two completely different scales of wealth.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. On one hand, you have these macro-sociological findings that just tear apart the self-made narrative, at least for the super rich. We're talking about the world of like extreme exponential wealth.
The Forbes list kind of wealth.
Exactly. And then on the other hand, you have this micro-level, almost behavioral playbook that shows how an average person, starting from zero, can accumulate a really substantial, reliable net worth.
So we're basically contrasting the volatile, high-growth startup world with the quiet, defensive reality of the proverbial millionaire next door.
That's the core tension.
So our mission today is to really decode this. We need to look critically at the undeniable role of privilege and serendipity, the luck factor that determines who lands on that Forbes list.
But just as important, maybe more important for our listeners,
I think so,
is to extract the granular, repeatable habits that drive net worth accumulation for you. For the person who is most likely starting from the batter's box, not already on home plate.
Yeah, so the core question really boils down to this, and it's directed straight at you, listening. If your main goal is reliable financial independence, is that built purely on defensive habits?
Like rigorous budgeting, disciplined saving, basically avoiding that lifestyle creep at all costs.
Or is the pursuit of that extreme exponential wealth just fundamentally dependent on having those early advantages and being able to tolerate huge strategic risks?
And we're going to see that the ingredients you need, they change entirely depending on what level of wealth you're actually aiming for.
Okay, so let's start at the very top. The absolute peak of the financial pyramid. Let's look at the super rich.
This is where things get interesting right away.
This is where the narrative fallacy, that tendency we have to oversimplify or romanticize a success story after it's already happened, it just comes violently into play.
Oh, yeah. You read any of the mainstream business publications, and they'll famously declare that, for example, 70% of the Forbes 400 made their fortunes entirely from scratch.
And that phrase is so powerful. It sounds like the American dream is just there for anyone with enough, elbow grease.
It serves a huge psychological function, right?
Yeah.
It's inspiring. But we need to introduce a critical analysis of that claim, specifically from groups like United for a Fair Economy or UFE.
And then what do they say?
Well, their research suggests this whole idea of the self-made super rich is, and this is their term, a deeply misleading tale.
A misleading tale.
Yeah. They argue that if you apply much more rigorous definitions for what starting from scratch actually means, the data shows something else entirely. The concentration of wealth among the top 400 is absolutely not just a reflection of individual merit or hard work.
It's leveraged privilege.
It's often highly leveraged privilege, yes.
And to map this out, the UFE introduced this incredible framework, the baseball analogy. I find this so useful because self-made can just minimize the gigantic, multi-layered head start some people get. It classifies them as self-made when they were really just running the last few feet.
Exactly. So the UFE breaks down the economic background of the Forbes 400 based on where they started on the field. Let's start with the biggest group of Americans, the 95% who start in poor or middle-class circumstances.
Okay.
These are the people born in the batter's box. They have no meaningful family wealth, no significant network. They're relying solely on what they can earn right at the start.
And logically, given that 95% of the U.S. population starts there, you'd expect the largest percentage of success stories to come from that group, right?
Yeah.
It would show that merit is universal.
You would think so, but the data on the extremely wealthy tells a starkly different story.
How different?
Only 35% of the 400 richest individuals came from those modest backgrounds.
35%. out of a group that makes up 95% of the population.
It's a massive underrepresentation. Now, let's contrast that with the privileged starting positions, where the network and the capital are already in place from day one.
And this is where we start moving around the bases, and the numbers just start to stack up really quickly against that self-made story.
So, if you were born on first base, which means you were an upper class family with an inheritance up to, say, $1 million,
Which is already a huge leg up.
a massive leg up, you represent 22% of the Forbes 400 list. $1 million in initial capital, access to top tier schools, introductions to the right early investors. That is not a bootstrap start.
No, that's a massive overrepresentation for what has to be a tiny slice of the population.
And it keeps going. Moving to second base, this would be inheriting a wealthy family business or receiving an inheritance of more than $1 million. That accounts for another 11.5% of the list.
So at that point, the wealth is often already organized, it's already producing income, or the business infrastructure is mature.
Right, the machine is already built, and we haven't even finished the inning yet. Then you get to the really stunning statistics, the ones that just emphasize how concentrated capital really is.
Oh.
Those born on third base who inherited wealth over $50 million, they represent 7% of the 400 richest.
So they might have turned 50 million to 500 million, but that initial sum, that already gave them maximum leverage and guaranteed security.
It's a different universe of risk.